Welcome, Poker Life. Next question, Crispin. What are the benefits and drawbacks for dating other poker players? Now, I know there's not a lot of women in poker, but what are the benefits and drawbacks?
Well, for my sins, I have dated poker players in the past. It is unique. It's unique in a number of respects. First, you're both in the same profession. Now, there are many couples around the world who are in the same profession. They meet each other at university, they meet each other at work. But if you're doing exactly the same thing, then you have to make sure you've got other things in your relationship beyond poker. That is really important. Ultimately, poker is an aspect of your life that is not enough to sustain an actual relationship. It's enough to make friends. It's enough to, nerd out on certain, spots and hands and gossip. And yeah, it's a great thing that you have in common, but it's super easy to just meet someone at the poker table and that's what you have in common. And because you spend so much time at the poker table, they're the people that you meet. So just make sure that when you actually date someone in poker, that you have more to talk about than poker, and that you would actually still date that person even if they weren't playing poker. That's the litmus test. Secondly, and this is a big one, poker is a game of ups and downs, and that puts stresses on the relationship. If you're in an upswing, you might be exuberant, you might want to celebrate, but if your partner is in a downswing, they may not be able to go there with you. They may be, trying to focus on their leagues, trying to cope with their downswing, etc. And if you're both in a downswing, that can put, stresses on the relationship in different ways. Because of that, it's really good to have stability, at least in one part of your life. And I find that one of the things that gets me out of any stresses is being in an environment where outside of poker, there's a degree of normalcy, stability, and predictability. That you come away from the table, you transition out of that, and you're in a new environment. And in that environment, you are a different person, different space. And that's really healthy for getting through downswings or getting through difficult spots or busting out of a big tournament or whatever, to actually take a break because you're actually in a different part of your life. Whereas if you're in a relationship with a poker player, you'll be rehashing that moment in conversation, in analysis, and you won't really be able to escape from it. That's one thing that I found, and that's something that my exes found in this space, that it's hard to go, okay, we're both going to go and do something else. That's difficult. Obviously, as you mentioned, the gender imbalance is huge, and that's going to be an issue, right? Like, because you're both going to have similar friends, you're both going to be mostly with male friends, like when you're playing poker, and that means you don't really separate yourself from those circles. This is just me, I find it's really useful when you're dating someone who has a different group of friends, like you have different things that you can come and talk to each other about from your different experiences. Whereas if you're constantly moving in the same circles, then you don't really have that much to talk about because you were there, right? So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Now, that's none of those things are to say don't do it, but there are some self-checks that you should ask yourself. The first thing you should ask is, would I date this person if it wasn't for poker? And if the answer is anything other than yes, then you are being lazy. You're not actually getting yourself out there. Well, that's exactly right. You're just dating someone because they happen to be there, right? You aren't going out and finding the person that's right for you. You're just in a very comfortable space, and because this person isn't disrupting that space in any way, you fell into it. You've settled, and that's not a good reason to get in a relationship. So you make sure you have a clear answer to that first question. Secondly, poker is competitive. And it's really important that in a relationship, you're not competing. So if you're talking about poker, are you getting defensive in the discussion? Is your ego getting involved? It's much worse when that happens with your partner than it is when you're talking to a coach or something who are used to managing these things. in a relationship, all the other aspects of the relationship can get tied into a discussion about a poker hand. And that's a disaster. That's not good for you at all. So it's very important to make sure that if you are dating a poker player and you're a poker player yourself, that when you discuss poker, which is inevitable, that you are both looking at it from the perspective of learning, exploring, discovery, interest, and not ego and who's better and etc. Like that's not a good way to manage it. And then finally, financially, obviously, if you're both playing poker, you both need to have the right bankroll. You both need to make sure that money isn't a big factor in your relationship. And if it is, then perhaps one of you needs to augment the income through other means. What is the actual balance of responsibilities in the relationship? That can be difficult to negotiate.
But there are many successful poker couples out there. So clearly there are benefits to also.
There are definitely benefits. For example, you both have flexibility in your career. Like if you want to go on a trip or do something together, you can, because you don't have to book leave and things like that. There is practical benefits. There's the benefit of having someone actually understand what you're talking about when you come home and use all the poker lingo and explain what happened. Your partner can kind of grasp that, and you will learn someone else's psychology and what they need to decompress from poker. Poker can be a very stressful activity. There'll be times when people are just dealing with the tension, and it is useful if your partner actually properly understands what that experience is like and what that person is going through, combined with understanding them, and that can help them react to things in the right way. And one thing that can be difficult in let's say normie relationships where there is one person who is a poker player and the other person isn't, is the burden is all on that poker player to manage their emotions in such a way that they can maintain a healthy relationship, and that can give them a sense of being disconnected. And the other person, they might see that their partner is stressed or has an issue or something they're dealing with in the poker world, and have no way of reaching them or knowing how to manage that. Now, I think that's a minority problem. I think the opposite is more of an issue where you've got two people in an up and down kind of world. I personally kind of have a rule against dating poker players these days, and it's purely because of the realities of having two people dealing with the ups and downs of poker at the same time. I think that for me personally, it's really important that there is one person who I can go to and talk to about things that aren't poker, that there are things that I can discuss that are going on in the world that are just much more everyday life, that means that I remain connected to the trials and vicissitudes of normal life. That's not true for everybody. That's purely for me. But I do find that a lot of people who have been in relationships with other professional poker players have shared many of the sentiments that I've expressed here. So if you are in a poker relationship, this is not me being all doom and gloom, but be mindful that you do have stresses. Like, for example, an analogy might be a relationship between two Hollywood stars, okay? It would be foolish for us to say that there is no downside to that. Yeah, there are benefits, of course. They're both in the same industry. They understand what celebrity life is like and the problems they have, with their attention and everything. Yeah. So they can relate to one another in that way. But their entire life is in public scrutiny. They see all these things about them on the internet. People constantly intruding into their relationship space. To say that there are no stresses especially in that situation, is simply wrong. And I think in the case of poker relationships do have their own stresses that do not apply when one person is in a different career. Yes, it's not for me to be like, oh, your relationship is a disaster. There are wonderful counterexamples, and we might even get them on the show one day. But certainly, I think we need to be sober when discussing this. It is difficult to maintain a healthy long-term relationship when two people are playing poker. It's not something that's discussed much, but I don't think it's wrong. I wouldn't even say it's that controversial.
Interesting. So it sounds like it's difficult to hold boundaries because poker is hyper competitive if you're both professional at it. But bring back to you guys, do you think so? Have you been in a relationship with another poker player who plays professionally? Do you face the same difficulties, or are there many benefits? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.